Welcome from the studios of KPBS TV at San Diego State University. The International Training Center today brings us all together in this teleconference, joining Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Peru, Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, the United States of America, and for the first time, Geneva in Switzerland. We would like to thank Keystone Communications, Telecomunicaciones de Mexico, PanamSat, and BrasilSat for their satellite linkage services which make this all possible today. Welcome to our program on commercial diplomacy and international negotiations. This is the 7th video conference of the series Principles for World-Class Performance. My name is Richard Page. I will be your moderator for today's program. I am a private attorney with the San Diego law firm of Page & Bush, practicing in the areas of business and international law. Today's program is composed of 2 presentation modules and 2 question and answer sessions. We look forward to your live participation. Commercial diplomacy is a subject which is important to all of us who are working with the international commerce and trade. Today's negotiator is required to learn foreign languages and cultures, to understand technical issues of various industries, to communicate with government and with the press, and to understand the dispute resolution mechanisms of mediation, arbitration, and the courts. Previous ITC programs have reviewed the roles of dispute resolution in the international arena. The parties to international agreements have increasingly come to believe that going to court is a time-consuming and inefficient manner of dispute resolution. The use of binding arbitration and non-binding mediation have grown to provide an alternative to litigation. The use of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms assumes that the parties have reached an impasse in negotiations. The creation of the agreement and the resolution of most problems begins with negotiation. The skills of negotiation in the international context are becoming increasingly demanding and require the training of commercial diplomats. It is a pleasure to introduce to you today's expert speakers, Mr. Geza Fekete-Kuti and the Honorable Rubens Recupero. Mr. Fekete-Kuti is the director of the Center for Trade and Commercial Diplomacy at the Monterey Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. Mr. Fekete-Kuti brings more than 20 years' experience in the Office of the United States Trade Representatives and is a former senior assistant U.S. Trade Representative. He played key roles in both the Tokyo and Uruguay rounds of multilateral negotiations and is widely credited with putting trade in services on the international agenda. For years, he chaired the OECD Trade Committee. Mr. Fekete-Kuti was also a senior staff economist on the Council for Economic Advisors and the Office of Management and Budget. He has been a scholar in residence at the International Trade Commission and was visiting professor at Cornell University and Johns Hopkins University. He has published books and articles on a broad range of trade, policy, and negotiations issues. The Honorable Rubens Recupero is the Secretary General of UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development in Geneva, Switzerland. Mr. Recupero served as Brazil's deputy head of the presidential staff, as special advisor to the president, as Minister of Environment and Amazonian Affairs, and as Minister of Finance. His diplomatic posts have included ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva, ambassador to the United States of America, and ambassador of Brazil to Italy. Mr. Recupero was chairman of the Finances Committee at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, Rio de Janeiro in 1992, and governor for Brazil at the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. He served as professor at the University of Brasilia and is also the author of several books and essays on international relations, economic development, and international trade and diplomatic history. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Let us begin with an introductory question. Do commercial negotiators really need to learn the skills of diplomacy, or are these skills more requirements for representatives of governments?
Well, commercial negotiators who try to buy or sell abroad or to invest abroad have to be able to learn about the business customs and practices of their counterparts, the people who they're negotiating with. If they run into particular government problems, regulations, tariffs, or just local disputes, they have to know how to deal with a local political situation. They have to know how to deal with the press and so forth. So they really have to have many of the same skills and capabilities as a government trade negotiator.
Mr. Kupro?
By all means, I fully agree, because I believe that the skills are the same. Sometimes the subject and the circumstances may vary, but the techniques and the methods of negotiations basically don't differ.
Thank you for your comments. Let us begin with Module 1, in which Mr. Fekete will explain the importance of commercial diplomacy.
Thank you. The world of trade and international commerce is becoming more important and challenging every day. Global markets are far more integrated than ever before. Firms are expanding their multinational production networks. Governments are negotiating far-reaching trade agreements. We live in a world where more and more business executives and government officials have to work and negotiate with people from other countries. These countries have different laws and institutions, follow different business practices, speak different languages, and are influenced by different cultural norms. Altogether, different realities. This has created a demand for business executives and government officials who can manage complex international economic relationships effectively. Corporations need executives who can negotiate joint ventures, contracts, sales agreements with foreign-based companies, as well as manage relationships with a wide range of governments around the world. Governments need officials who can negotiate agreements and who can help to resolve conflicts among nations in a wide range of commercial, social, environmental, and other domestic issues related to trade. These business executives and officials require a new kind of professional training in public and private conduct of commercial diplomacy. This new breed of commercial diplomat combines the role of diplomat with the role of economic manager. Many of the problems and opportunities that arise in international commerce inevitably have a political dimension. For this reason, success requires not only an ability to deal with economic issues, but also an ability to navigate political and legal channels and to help mold public opinion globally. Dealing with commercial issues across national borders effectively requires special knowledge and skills. This is over and above the professional knowledge and managerial skills required of a competent business executive or government official. The commercial diplomat masters this new global dimension of commerce. In the past, most professionals engaged in commercial diplomacy received no formal training. Instead, they had to acquire the required knowledge and skills in a piecemeal fashion while carrying out their duties as business executives or government officials. Aspiring trade negotiators learned the art by working with more experienced professionals and by making mistakes. This apprenticeship system was a school of hard knocks. I will be talking to you today about the knowledge and skills required to achieve professional competence in this field. I am speaking to you about this subject from the point of view of both an educator and a former trade official. During the course of my presentation, we will show you selected simulations of different aspects of commercial diplomacy. Simulations are an important educational technique used in this field, and the training simulations you will see were carried out by students and professionals studying commercial diplomacy. Today, my presentation will be organized around 4 key aspects of commercial diplomacy: the historical forces that are creating the need for commercial diplomats, the professional skills and knowledge required of a commercial diplomat, particularly in the realm of negotiation, the institutions and laws that guide international commercial transactions, and the wide range of subjects a commercial diplomat may have to master. Let us explore in greater detail why commercial diplomacy has become so much more important in recent years. Trade and foreign investment have consistently grown faster than domestic output in most developed countries since World War II, and therefore now constitute a significant share of the GNP of those countries. The more recent adoption of market-oriented reforms and export-driven growth strategies by most developing and former communist countries has served to integrate these countries more effectively into the global economy. The globalization of production through the outsourcing of components and business services has multiplied the need to coordinate closely the activities of enterprises in many different countries. The negotiation of new regional trade agreements to eliminate barriers to international trade and investment, agreements such as the European Union, Mercosur, NAFTA, FTA, and APEC, has significantly expanded the role and impact of trade agreements. In fact, in the aftermath of the Cold War, trade agreements have become the principal means of strengthening political relationships and security ties among countries. This is further accelerating international cooperation on a wide range of domestic policies and issues. Commercial diplomacy is therefore an increasingly important skill for government officials, issue advocates, and business managers who need to interact with their foreign counterparts on a day-to-day basis. So let me summarize. Commercial diplomacy is becoming increasingly important as a result of the expansion of trade and foreign investment, the globalization of production, adoption of market reforms and export-driven growth strategies, and the negotiation of free trade agreements, and the post-Cold War environment. Let me next turn to the professional skills and knowledge required of a commercial diplomat. One very important skill is the ability to negotiate. In a minute, I will show you a classroom lecture on negotiations at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. It includes a simulation of a bilateral negotiation by students studying for a master's degree in commercial diplomacy. The simulation is intended to teach students basic negotiating techniques and the use of interpreters in a negotiation. To establish the context for this and subsequent simulations, we have assumed the following scenario. The United States and Chilean governments negotiated an agreement eliminating U.S. tariffs on grapes. To take advantage of this agreement, Chilean grape growers have contacted American distributors of grapes to negotiate a distribution agreement. The simulation covers the negotiation of the terms of such an agreement. One of the issues raised during this negotiation is the post-harvest fumigation of the Chilean grapes. The U.S. importer points out that this is a U.S. government requirement, but that they are willing to work with the Chilean exporters in seeking its removal. Some students represent the Chilean grape growers, while others represent American distributors. The simulation will involve consecutive interpretation, since we assume that neither side is fluent enough in both English and Spanish to negotiate in the other country's language.
My name is Bill Monning. I'm an instructor with the Center for Trade and Commercial Diplomacy at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. I teach in the area of negotiation practice, where we emphasize principled negotiation focusing on people, interests, options, and objective criteria. In the first negotiation simulation, you will see two business interests, one representing Chilean Grape Growers Association, the other a United States import-export company, negotiating the terms and conditions of a commercial agreement. We will also incorporate the role of a consecutive interpreter to show the very important role of language and interpretation in cross-cultural and cross-language negotiations.
Bueno, una de nuestras preocupaciones más grandes es las inspecciones de salud y agricultura que los Estados Unidos tienen. Nos han informado que los Estados Unidos imponen un requerimiento de fumigación de post cosecha. Y para explicarles un poco más sobre este tema, voy a dar la palabra a Gustavo Barbaría, nuestro director de Relaciones Internacionales y especialista en inspecciones de salud.
First of all, I want to mention that one of our greatest concerns here is the phytosanitary inspections of the U.S. And I believe that the U.S. has very specific requirements regarding the post-harvest. And in order for you to know exactly what it is that we are concerned about, I'm going to ask our Director of International Relations to explain to you about this now.
Como ustedes saben, es el Departamento de Agricultura quien impone el requisito de una fumigación post cosecha de metilo-bromuro. El problema con ese requerimiento es que reduce la duración del producto en el supermercado de 7 días a 2 días. También habría que contar el tiempo que lleva el transporte de las uvas desde Chile hasta los Estados Unidos. Entonces ustedes tendrán muy poco tiempo para vender este producto. No solamente el poco tiempo, pero también el aspecto mismo de la uva se deteriora notablemente. Por ende, el consumidor no querrá comprarlo porque tiene una mala apariencia y perjudicará nuestro negocio a la vez que el suyo. Entendemos que es entonces un problema para ustedes también.
I would like to point out to you that it is the U.S. Agriculture Department that imposes all these requirements on the methyl bromide fumigation. And the problem is that this reduces the life shelf of the product from 7 days to 2 days. And also, we need to take into account the transportation of the product. I mean, between Chile and the U.S., the grapes are going to be this doesn't allow us enough time, and the appearance of the grapes is also an issue here. We know that the consumer will not like the grapes that don't look good, so we all would be losing. So this is a problem that concerns both of us, and we need to try and find some suitable solution for this.
Thank you. To address that concern, I'd like to introduce you now to our liaison for government relations, Jason Bunton, and he will address that concern for you.
Muchas gracias. Para tratar este tema quisiera darle la palabra a nuestro especialista en las relaciones con el gobierno, Jason Benton, quien nos va a hablar un poquito más sobre esto y explicarles un poco más.
Thank you. As Mr. Barbaria stated, this is of mutual concern to both parties. Anything that affects the shelf life of your product will affect your business possibilities as well as ours. However, this area is regulated by the government, and we have no direct authority over these specific regulations. But as this is of mutual concern to both parties, we are willing to do what we can to resolve this issue. We would like a long-term relationship with your company, and we would like to hopefully do good business. So we will make whatever efforts we can to try and resolve this.
Sí, muchas gracias. En realidad este sí es un tema que nos concierne a ambas partes, y el problema de la duración de la vida del producto en las estanterías, en las tiendas, en los almacenes, en los supermercados realmente constituye un problema muy importante. Sin embargo, quiero hacerles ver que esto es un problema del gobierno, son los reglamentos del gobierno y nosotros no tenemos ninguna autoridad sobre esta reglamentación. Pero quiero reiterarles que ya que esto es un problema que nos atañe a ambos, nosotros queremos ver si podemos hacer todo lo posible por ayudar a resolver esto, ver qué tipo de gestiones podemos hacer ante el gobierno, porque nos interesa tener una relación a largo plazo con su empresa y por supuesto a ambos nos interesa el hacer negocio, de tal manera que vamos a poner todo de nuestra parte para lograr, para ver qué gestiones se pueden hacer ante el gobierno. In negotiations, even if you have people who speak the same one language and who have a common language and who can converse in that language, you still need to hire a skilled translator or interpreter to help you with the negotiations. Why? Because first of all, we have precision here that is absolutely indispensable, and we need to deal with technical terms. You have legal terms as well, so you have legal issues for business contracts, for example. And also, you have to take into account the cultural element. We are dealing with two different cultures here, and we're translating one culture to the other one. And so we're not just dealing with words. We are trying to have a person understand what the other culture understands. And this is why you need a professional intercultural communicator.
The simulation demonstrates 3 important skills required of a commercial diplomat: international negotiation, forming alliances on government policy issues, and making proper use of interpreters in a negotiation. While commercial diplomacy deals with commercial issues, there are many issues that arise that are not business related, but which nevertheless influence the commercial outcome. Therefore, it becomes crucial in principled negotiations to identify both the economic and non-economic interests of the parties. By learning to recognize the full range of interests of all parties to a negotiation, the negotiator can begin to work in partnership to develop creative options and solutions. By following certain key principles of negotiation, the commercial diplomat can successfully craft durable and mutually beneficial agreements. In the simulation, the negotiators pursued one of those principles by identifying a shared interest, that of removing the post-harvest fumigation requirement for Chilean grapes. The most obvious skill required of a commercial diplomat is the ability to speak foreign languages and to use interpreters effectively. Nuances in language can have major consequences for the interpretation of an agreement. For non-English speakers, a fluent command of English is essential, since most international trade negotiations outside Latin America are carried out in English. Another essential skill is being able to negotiate and build consensus with people from different cultural backgrounds. This requires an awareness of national differences in how issues are discussed, in the role that personal relationships play in reaching agreement, in the manner in which agreement and disagreement is communicated, and in how consensus is reached. It also requires a basic knowledge of negotiating techniques and of national differences in negotiating styles and tactics. I find that one of the most important skills lacking in many managers today is the ability to write short, concise memoranda designed to convince the recipient of such a memorandum of a desired course of action. This involves a detailed understanding of institutional roles, the information needs of officials or executives in different positions, and what is likely to be persuasive in different situations. In order to develop these skills effectively, simulations and role-playing can be useful educational techniques. Rather than preparing term papers and other traditional academic exercises, students learn to master the preparation of letters, memoranda, and speeches based on realistic scenarios drawn from current, real-life situations. Commercial diplomacy also requires some basic political and public relations skills. A commercial diplomat has to learn how to navigate through the administrative, legal, and political procedures of other countries. This requires learning how decisions regarding trade and investment issues are made in different countries, and how an outsider might be able to influence such decisions. Whatever the country involved, a commercial diplomat may need to work with many different governments and individuals to change government regulations that impede trade or investment. These include officials responsible for regulatory decisions, legislators and politicians, the press, opinion leaders in research institutions and elsewhere, allies at home or abroad who can lend political support. An effective commercial diplomat has to be able to develop a comprehensive and integrated negotiating strategy. Such a strategy needs to encompass all the various players who have an interest in the issue and who can have a bearing on the outcome. In summary, the practice of commercial diplomacy requires the following set of professional skills: knowledge of foreign languages and cultures, cross-cultural negotiation and consensus building, legislative strategy and advocacy, media strategy and public relations, development of integrated negotiating strategies, investigation of issues and research into new areas of knowledge. In a minute, I will show you the second and third simulations. They are intended to demonstrate one of the basic techniques for influencing public policy, namely the use of a press conference to mold public opinion. In the simulations, you will see excerpts from two different press conferences, one by the Chilean grape growers and the other by the Office of the United States Trade Representative. In our scenario, the Chilean grape growers and the American distributors have decided to pursue this issue with their respective governments. To support their cause, the Chilean grape growers have decided to call a press conference in Washington, D.C. They hope to demonstrate that the American import requirement is unreasonable and inconsistent with international trade rules. Confronted by the demand of the Chilean growers and their press conference, the United States Trade Representative's office decides to call a press conference of its own to clarify and defend the post-harvest fumigation requirement. Since both press conferences are assumed to take place in Washington, D.C.,